We'll get started. So we're talking today a little bit about the insightful enterprise and how we've evolved self-serve analytics with Tableau within VMware. It's been a fun journey, I suppose, to kind of describe it. And I think journey is a word that we often use an awful lot, and I think that really does apply to this in terms of being a bit of a slog and a bit of a fun and a bit of a downhill and a bit of an uphill, which I'm sure some of you are probably experiencing at the moment. So I'm just going to kind of give you a rundown of the agenda, so then you kind of know where we are in the presentation, and then when you feel that lunch is calling you a little bit sooner, you'll know when to duck out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about me, because I like talking about me, but I'm going to talk a bit more about VMware. And kind of get into our kind of how we went from information overload and the amount of data that we had to kind of changing direction and bringing in self-serve capabilities. But also not just for self-serve capabilities, but how we are starting to kind of get our executives and leaders into the mindset of what we want to bring to them as an organization and taming the amount of data that we have out there. And a little bit then about what we're doing on engagement and our future steps. The clue is probably in the title. It's evolving. Our focus is changing all the time in terms of what we do as an organization. Certainly the technology aspect is always developing. And demos and dashboards that we do, of course, will kind of change. We want to kind of bring it into a little bit more of a visual point of view. So this is a very quick little bit about me. My name's Kevin, so hi. Thank you all again for coming. I've been with VMware for just over 7 years now. I'm working as part of the business intelligence, business analytics team. So we're supporting all of the enterprise across the globe. And for VMware, I suppose, we are quite a large company. I think most people probably know of us from virtualization software, but we also are into end user computing, network virtualization. We also are involved with hybrid clouds. And you probably saw us in the news earlier on this week if you were keeping an eye with Mr. Dell and sorting out shares and tracking stocks and so forth. So we're kind of all part of the Dell Technologies family. There's over 20,000 employees that we have worldwide. That was a picture of one of our buildings in Palo Alto in California, but we're dotted everywhere pretty much, I think. Myself, I'm based in Cork in Ireland. We also have offices down in Staines here in the UK. And I suppose this year we're kind of looking at our 20th anniversary. So back in 1998 we were founded, and here's some of the highlights that have happened over that time. I'm a bit disappointed I didn't shoehorn myself starting around 2011 in there, but you can see that an awful lot has happened in this kind of 20th anniversary, particularly in the last year with tie-ups with Dell, Amazon, our tech partners and so forth. One thing the slide doesn't really show you though is our relationship with data. We are a very, 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 very passionate company when it comes to data. I think, for everyone in the organization, one of the first things they kind of tend to do when they start up and get their Windows accounts and get their email sorted is, okay, so how do I get the data that I want to use for the report that I'm going to want to build? And I kind of laugh a little bit when I hear people talk about data being the new oil in this century. I think, well, not really true. Data for us is the new oxygen. It's our lifeblood. We live it. We use it. We utilize it. We're making our decisions with it. And we move on. Each breath is a new intake of data for us. And with that, I suppose, being such a data-intensive company, that gave us our own challenges in itself. Each group, as we developed and built up, started to take data and harness it in a new way. And we got to a point about 5-6 years ago where really the startup mentality of what we had was starting to crack and the strains were showing. And we were heading into information overload, or as I like to call it, the beginning. So to give you an example of how we were kind of set up and structured, different groups within the company had their own data reporting needs, and each group would then connect perhaps to a database or pull from a sanctioned source. And that in turn would then go to another database perhaps, which might have outputted data into a SharePoint folder, which might have then been connected to another group of users, which then would have connected to another SharePoint folder, which then might have actually started to pull data from another database, which was a different data set altogether. Then someone wanted to connect one database to another, but didn't have actual rights, so wanted to pull it through into an Excel file. Excel file starts becoming the new data source then based on information being pulled. Someone else then sets up a schedule to force more data out for folks. And a sort of tangled ecosystem starts to develop amongst us of different parts of the company using different data sets, some using similar databases, some using slightly different versions of the databases, and different groups and teams all pulling the information together, which is a little bit of a tangled mess, I'm sure, because when you are ultimately reporting up your organization, eventually all your numbers are going to need to tie up. So this is where we began. Alongside that then, you had all of your functional teams. So by functional teams, it could be sales, it could be finance, it could be marketing, could be HR, all of them having their own disparate sets of data that's unique for them. And they're all looking at it through their own particular lens. So in order to kind of make sense of all the information that they wanted to have and to pull and bring all that data down to it, we came up with this really original idea called Excel. Now, Excel was brilliant for us because, of course, we could make direct connections to SQL databases and to other systems, pull data down to ODBC, pivot on it, and start to develop wonderful reports of various types and skills and design and so forth, which were very, very much text heavy. And some of these reports, and I kind of say the word reports a little bit kind of with disdain perhaps, they actually turned into applications in themselves. Some Excel files might have had about 30 tabs, all with various different views and cuts of the data that we had. And people in the operations teams and various groups would then go and run these reports, pull them down, and issue them out to the organization. So a lot of repetition, a lot of overlap going on with that. And as you know, with Excel, I suppose there's a risk that the data is going to get corrupted, someone's going to type in a wrong value, there's the wrong data pull, something's happened at the wrong time, and so forth. So we were having a lot of intensity when it came to Excel. But hey, business was happy. They were getting their data. So really, I don't know why I'm making a big deal about this. It was a solution that worked. On top of that, then I suppose we started to kind of find that it was getting a little bit complex, bringing in all of these huge data files. You know, we're getting into megabytes and getting into hundreds of megabytes in terms of file sizes. You know, how do we represent that back up to our exec leaders at the top? You know, we can't really say, well, here's your report for the quarter because it's an Excel file, and if you go to tab 23 and you scroll down to the 5th pivot below, you'll find the actual answer you're looking for. So we then found an ingenious solution on top of what was already a clever way of looking at things, which was to use PowerPoint. So PowerPoint was the answer to everything for us now, because now we could visualize the data. And we could visualize the data in a way that, you know, summarize all the Excels, PowerPoint it up, nice charts, nice bar charts, you know, something a little bit colorful, because we like colors are bright, and use that to kind of represent our data. Of course, then the teams that were doing this were probably spending a lot of time pulling the data down, and then they were spending a lot of time using PowerPoint to compile all the data together. And particularly when you get to the end of the quarter, or perhaps the end of the half, or the end of the year, and you're compiling a lot of data down, it got a bit busy. So we had some challenges that were arising from that. And I suppose the first challenge that we kind of saw from this ecosystem was that we had different versions of the same data. Someone would pull data down from a system, would apply various filters, and present that as the number. And then someone else would go to the same data set, apply slightly different filters because they're looking at the world through that particular way, and got a different number. And then it got a little bit argumentative. We had no true single answer for our leaders. Everyone had an answer for them, but nothing that was standard across the organization. So our leaders were kind of getting conflicting messages from different parts of the company when they were meeting up and saying, well, what's our figure here? This is it. No, it's not. I don't agree. And again, you know, arguments would have broken out on that. We also ended up having duplicate records. So part of the thing, of course, with the whole ecosystem that we saw is we have databases which are refreshing, and then they're loading to other systems, and then they're loading down to Excels. And sometimes we were finding duplication were coming in there. So when a leader, let's say a sales leader, was looking at their figures and going, yes, I'm on target, I'm only halfway through the quarter, they weren't actually on target. They were actually looking at their figure in double because we loaded the data in twice into the databases. And it's only through when the analysts are looking at the Excel reports or is actually under a review that this start to come up, and the general answer was, yeah, okay, we'll look at that. We'll come back to you probably later in the week with the real answer. We also had frequent data outages as well. Many a time, particularly Mondays, were such a critical time for looking at what state the various parts of the organization are in, where there was a deadline of, let's say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the data isn't working, the databases aren't downloading, the source system's offline. Someone who's in California, who's the one person who knows how the system works, won't be in till 3, 4 o'clock in our timeline, so we have to wait for them to come in. Could be later. So sometimes we were finding data outages that went beyond when we actually wanted the data, but also going into days at times. I think the worst example I know I had kind of dealing and talking to stakeholders was probably about 4 days of an outage because we had dependencies on individuals who had a database under the desktop with their feet on it and running kind of reports and data and so forth out of it. Again, we also had the same metric, with different definitions of the same metric. It sounds mad now, but I kind of think of it and go, well, yeah, there were, if someone said to me, this is your actual result, I would take it that there's one single actual result, but we seem to have about 3 or 4 different actual results, depending on who you talk to. And again, challenges loading some data, and very much we were instigating the wrong solutions for different problems. And I'd probably add to that and say we're probably instigating the wrong solutions for different problems for different leaders. Everyone had their own particular view. So things were good. And we weren't really kind of too worried about it. We were getting by. I think there was a general acceptance that, this is the way the systems are. Yeah, they could be better. Maybe if we throw a bit more memory at a database, maybe if we up a server or increase, or can we virtualize a new server? After all, we're into virtualization. Can we perhaps kind of get some more out of it? But really it wasn't. It was cracks were very much showing. And for leaders who are kind of wanting to grow an organization and get away from a little bit more of a startup mentality into a more mature way of looking at things, it was becoming more and more problematic. So we needed to change direction. A different tact was taken. And we wanted to start kind of someplace a little bit different. So first of all, I suppose we had all this talent across all of the organization, and different groups and teams, be it, again, finance, HR, marketing, etc., all had analysts and experts who understood the data, who understood the business, and who could actually help us in terms of how we'd start to change the direction. So we started with a kind of taking some of the analysts and the leaders from these various groups and bring them into kind of a shared community where we can work with IT in terms of how do we start to kind of move the business on. But where we started very much at the very beginning was with people. And in this day and age when we talk so much about machine learning and augmented reality and artificial intelligence, and I will talk a small bit about that myself later, it's kind of worth reminding ourselves that it's people that are the drivers behind all of the information consumption that exists within an organization. And we went and spoke to people at all different layers of the hierarchy, right from the very top, from our CEO, all the way down to VPs, the directors, senior directors, managers, analysts, testers, developers, and so forth. And so, well, if from looking at things from a data point of view and from a reporting standpoint, what is it that makes sense to you in order to be able to kind of to start delivering the answers to questions perhaps that haven't been asked yet? And the first answer we got back from was they wanted sanctioned sources of data, which is fair enough given we had 4 different versions of perhaps a bookings database and 3 versions of marketing or customer account information. So we wanted a sanctioned source of truth. We wanted a place that we could go and get information and know that that is good, clean data. It's trusted, it's worthwhile, and how do we start to build up the confidence? And confidence, I suppose, is key to this. How do we ensure that the organization has trust? Because, of course, we all know that once that trust starts to be eroded, it's very hard to come back from that saying, well, yeah, we'll fix it, and there's another problem, and we fix it, another problem. So we needed sanctioned sources of data. And we had to obviously then go look at kind of mechanisms and technology in terms of how we enable that sanctioned sources of data to be set up. The second response that we got was that we wanted business insights now. It's no good telling a leader, here's how your business is looking, on a Friday, because they already know how their business is looking on a Friday. They've been living it through the whole week. They want to know what the business is like for next week. and what's going to happen in the coming days, and where do we need to start to adjust course. We were great at looking at historicals and combining it and giving kind of almost like a report card back to the company and say, this is how we're doing, but without kind of thinking, well, where do we need to change tact here a little bit. We obviously wanted our data to be secure. There's nothing to stop anyone from picking up an Excel file with a list of customers and their contact details and so on, and heaven forbid if that should happen, and walking out the door. And obviously with the data ramifications of that in terms of confidentiality and so forth, it's just a nightmare that we never wanted to have and thankfully didn't endure. So we obviously wanted to make sure our data was secure. But secure also meant ensuring that the right data was for the right individuals. A lot of people in the organization had access to probably sensitive information, because through history and legacy they were given that access, so when they started were kind of put in that position, but had moved on. And yet we're still making that data available to them. So we obviously had to kind of clean it up and ensure that they don't start looking at things that are really not really relevant to them, or start raising questions perhaps that are when other execs and leaders are working on it. We also wanted to have kind of line of sight, and again, looking forward. Where are we going as an organization? Where do we start to make changes? So that I don't need to kind of find out at the end of the quarter, this is how I did. I'd rather know before I got to the end of the quarter in case I need to make an adjustment. Because then our leaders started to kind of were looking at things when they found out things at the end of the quarter, and the story they were telling back to the organization wasn't so much, look how great I did. It was almost kind of covering up a little bit of homework. Well, we would have had this if it wasn't for that, and I need the story here to kind of start to cushion the impact, or maybe the bad news, kind of soften it up a little bit and so forth. And finally, and I suppose it goes without saying for all of us here today, they wanted it to be interactive. We want to start being able to get involved with data. We want to start be able to kind of start to question it and tease in and dive into it, but also make sense. There's an awful lot of data out there, as we were kind of saying. So this is kind of what our organization were kind of looking for. And for us then, as a analytics team, we also kind of started to look at some goals that we want to achieve. Obviously, we wanted to bring in self-service, and we wanted that from having a sanctioned single source of truth. Go here to get the information you need. Go here because the reports and data you have are accurate. Go here because it's the only place to get everything you want to know that's combined and built up for the enterprise's purpose-built. But thinking about that then, and kind of where we started to go on this journey, we then wanted to start to look at how we can digitize and open up new possibilities for our business. And when I say digitize, I very much kind of, I'm looking at those Excels and PowerPoints that were out there. How do we start to transform those, especially for executives and for leaders who are just key decision makers, that they have the information in front of them without having to go through the effort of contacting Joe or contacting Jane and asking, have they got the data, is it pulled, or how can I start to kind of get some analysis? Because even our decision makers are kind of are data savvy, and they like to go in and look at the information and go, oh, I see something here. And maybe in a little bit of them, they're kind of looking at it going, oh, I can figure something out here, perhaps no one else has looked at. So we wanted to start with the first one, the self-serve, but that kind of took us down into kind of where information perhaps is not as accessible. How do we start to give that, open up the doors, I suppose, and let the air in and shine on top of it. So what was self-serve? For us, I suppose it was three different things. First of all, we wanted our end users, particularly in analysts and those who were in operations teams, that they could design and deploy their own reports and have full control over the tools and data to do it. There was a fear initially that we were kind of going to take away all the Excels and take away the PowerPoints. And when you hear the word take away, naturally there's a kind of defensiveness starts to build up. Don't take away what I have because I need that. That's the report that I use, and that's the data that we're kind of given. So we really had to kind of ensure that, look, we're not trying to take away something, we're trying to give something back. We also wanted to ensure that all of our data and our information was centrally owned and managed through IT, and that when there was requests for data to be added, data is evolving all the time, you'll have new fields brought in, that IT are involved in bringing that data in there, that we're not just taking a set of data, ramming on another set, doing a rough join and handing that out, and having kind of another spin-off database start to take over. We really wanted to ensure that everything was kept central, that the systems were operating at peak efficiency, that all of the connections were done in a manner that was, trustworthy again for users, and that performance wasn't going to be impacted. We really wanted people to be delighted that they go onto a system or go onto a server and go, oh, the data's there already, which means I don't have to wait an hour and go for a cup of coffee. I'm sure there's a few people who liked their hour and had to go for a cup of coffee, but that's another story. And finally, we wanted end users, again, who wanted to deploy their reports analysis, but to do within that approved structure and tools portfolio. And that's a slightly different it's similar, I think, to the top, but slightly different in terms of Tableau is one of the tools that we use. It's not the only one. We've kind of gone through iterations, but it's one of the tools that we use that's probably had the most visual impact. But what we did with this is we want to ensure that the right tool was there for the right job. If you want a lot of data and is very in-depth, and you love a table that just outputs to Excel, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not going to stop you from doing it. You're just going to go through our systems now to get that information and pull it down. Tableau perhaps is probably not the greatest for large volumes of data sets going down, but certainly it makes up for it then in the visual aspect and the visual nature that it brings. So our end users kind of got some options in terms of what they wanted to do, where they wanted to connect. But Tableau was very different. So how we started to build this up was we got ourselves kind of built up an enterprise data warehouse. There's so much activity in this one half of the slide, which is going to upset a lot of people because I'm doing a disservice to them. But we pulled in all of the various sources that we identified as primary data sources within the company. So your finance information, there's probably about 5, 6 different primary sources in there perhaps. Your expenses, your receipts, all that has to kind of go in there. Sales, obviously, you're looking at, where your leads are, what have you actually closed on, who are your salespeople, what are their targets, what are your targets as an organization, all of that gets brought in. Likewise, marketing, campaigns, what is the return that we see on there? And even support, what are the customers who are interacting with us? Who are the customers that are happy? Who are the customers who are not so happy? How do we start to build a bigger picture of what's going on from our own customer ecosystem? Customers are very important to us. And then we also kind of built all in a kind of set of rules and from a master data point of view and some modeling as well that kind of comes into a little bit more with the machine learning and analytics aspect of it. So we've kind of combining everything into an enterprise data warehouse. I think roughly, at last count, we probably had about 80 different individual sources that we're pulling in there on a regular basis. And this enterprise data warehouse is sitting on Hadoop. So it is updating fairly frequently now for most of the data sources, which again is another step beyond kind of getting a once a day or a twice a day refresh of data from various databases. So with that, all our data is in there. We took on and kind of started to look at Tableau Server. This was a big change because nothing like this had been deployed in the organization on an enterprise level before. And why we went with Tableau Server was it gave us the ability for some core data services. I think if I press that might work. So these core data sources here are really kind of an extension of some of the data that's pulled in there. There would be hundreds, if not thousands, of columns and rows in there that you could potentially take a look at. And different parts of the organization are still going to want to have their particular cut or their look at it, but of course ensuring that it's all in line with what we see as this enterprise data warehouse. So it allowed us to create kind of core data sources in terms of here's an accounting data source, here's your marketing data source, here's your finance data source, all in line with what we see in terms of being cleaned up and standardized and brought into our EDW. It also offered us security and connectivity and performance. We now can control who is looking at the data and perhaps who isn't. We already kind of go through some kind of stringent processes ensuring that if you are looking at data, you have approvals, that you are the person who should be looking at this given the nature, that you've gone through various trainings and so forth. But this gave us an extra element in terms of ensuring that people were connecting, were seeing the data they could. For some instances, they might not have the ability to download and export data to Excel to kind of take that away. They kind of look at it from a higher point of view. For others, they can, depending on their access and so forth. And obviously, the connectivity that we have with Tableau Server suddenly opens up the fact that people are connecting to a web browser to get information and pull it down. And performance as well was another aspect that we were quite pleased with, given where we had come from before, which was the data bog, so to speak. From Tableau Server, then I suppose we kind of look at it and kind of start to look at what our users were going to do. So For some users, particularly our power users, Tableau Desktop was available to them. But also we also kind of wanted to bring in some data blending, because not everything we would have structured would have gone into the data warehouse. There's always new data being generated. There's always a new view. There's always a new metric. So we wanted to leave the business that freedom. Again, not taking away, trying to give back in terms of what they wanted to integrate with what they see in Tableau. But in the end, we're looking at these dashboards which business users can deploy, which the analytics teams can deploy. And we start to kind of see then for our end users, they're now being able to look at the information and collaborate a lot better and have a visual point of view of how things are. Our power users are able to go in and build out their own particular dashboards. Every group has a folder, let's say, that exists here that they can go and upload, and they can pull the data down, so they're very much self-sufficient on that, and they can blend their data. And for content contributors, other team groups, we have a conversation going on with them in terms of ensuring that the content that we see is in line with what the businesses expect to see, what we have in our data sources, and of course our data warehouse. So taking that step a little bit beyond that then, that's fine. We've got a sort of an ecosystem going now, and we're up to a great start. But experimentation, I suppose, is one key aspect I think we should all kind of want to look at. So with Tableau Server, we set up a self-serve environment in a way. And that self-serve environment had, and this is a little bit of a cheat to be quite honest, because it's all sitting in the self-serve environment database. This would have had all the data that's in the data warehouse available to us. Any new data sources that we would want to bring in and test would go in here, as well as what we'd call the core data sources. So, the established finance, operations, HR, support data sources we have in there. And also if you have all those other sources that exist in CSV and text that have not yet been brought in or centralized or clean and improved and standardized, will go into the self-serve environment. Then Tableau Desktop and web authoring were opened up, so power users were very much looking at the desktop. Casual users could go into Tableau Server, use some of the data sets that they have access to sitting there, and be able to start to generate some quick reports, a quick pivot perhaps, a quick bar chart, and start to kind of build up the competencies that were there for them. And again, our power users were connecting. Some power users were publishing their reports onto the self-serve environment, and since some end users were using it as consumers and for validation and going on and saying, hey, I like this is good. Can you change it though to maybe show a different value, or can we start to see different asks? And end users, of course, have always got the great ask. No sooner have you delivered what could be the most beautiful masterpiece of a dashboard in Tableau, the first question is, this is brilliant, but. So we'll always get feedback from them on that. But this self-serve environment, I suppose, was more open for experimentation, given the different data sets that we have here. And that we want to ensure that we had an element of trust in terms of going from playing in the sandbox to going into a more production environment. So with creating of these new dashboards, that's great, and people are trying things out. But what we also set up on the side of this was a production environment, which is almost a copy of what we have in self-serve, with some differences. Self-serve would be refreshed once a week from this enterprise data warehouse. So if you were looking at a visualization or data that you needed a lot more of a sooner refresh, then really this wasn't the place to go. This was your experimentation, this was your playground. Here in production, you're refreshed about 2, 3, 4 times a day. So our enterprise data warehouse is available, our core data sources are there, and any new data sources which we've now automated and sanctioned, so we're saying these new ones that perhaps were over here, we're clean and they're good and they're going to become part of this ecosystem, are going to start to be in there. You'll notice, however, though, that the other sources, the CSV, is not up here. We don't want anyone putting in custom information in here because we feel that will start to tarnish or maybe kind of impure the content of the level of data we have. So our analysts will tend to look at self-serve as the experimentation. Our executives will tend to go to production for the end results. This is the dashboard as of the release date. And yes, dashboards will go back and they'll update in one and they'll go across to another. But really, we want to ensure that there's a high level of trust and confidence in the data, and when people go to this production environment, they have it. And again, you can still interact with a power user, you can still connect to the data sources, end users can still go in and run their reports, but the data is set. It isn't going to change. Whereas self-serve is going to have a little bit more of flexibility, of flux, of testing and trial and error and so forth. The great thing with self-serve though is, of course, it allows that experimentation and it gives folks a chance to try something out. And when we're ready then, I suppose we kind of go through a support and maintenance process to ensure that any changes that we do on self-serve are applied to production, but that the performance isn't impacted. They're not trying to pull in a pile of information and data, that the quality is good, that we can go proceed. And then ultimately at the end, what you might see as a new data source there, my arms aren't long enough, will start to make its way over to production and become there to the end result, to where we are. So this ecosystem, and it took a while for folks to kind of get their kind of handle on it, because everyone was kind of going into self-serve going, oh great, I'll do everything here and I'll produce my report. And then we'd say, well, that's fine, but once you have it ready, you have to put it through production. So we're going through kind of core examples. A lot of folks were going, yeah, but I'm not finished yet, or I need to do it. So again, a change control process we were bringing in terms of ensuring that what was happening here could apply over here. But having that self-serve environment was very, very useful because it sparked something out in our organization. People started to see data in a different way to how they'd ever seen it before. This is an example of a dashboard that we did as an analytics team, one of the early ones, in terms of looking at, I think this was cases that probably came into our own team, and how were we doing, and open and close and so forth. It's probably taken a little bit later, but and at the bottom, I know it's probably hard to see, we had cases by stakeholder. So we could see what was asked. We made that information available to business users to say, okay, here's how we're doing. And at the same time, for execs leaders, and I blurred this out a little bit intentionally, but we were starting to give very basic visual aspects in terms of, nothing too overwhelming, that people go in and start to look and see what was performance. And our leaders suddenly had a view of the entire organization on one page, as opposed to 30 tabs in one Excel file, times that by another 30, 40, 50. Be kind of coming to available to them and getting a sort of a version of events that perhaps might not have been the full story. So they're definitely starting to see the picture. And by sparking this, I suppose, then this started to kind of take change. But I kind of want to show how we started to involve and build up the confidence of our users doing this. So let me go back. I have a demo, which I need to do a little bit of fiddling about, but if I do that right, I'll bring that over. Now, hopefully now I haven't timed myself out of that, but that would be about right. So here is come back. Here is a fictitious data dashboard. I'll give you a clue, it's fictitious. There's a large red sign on the top that says it's fictitious. So this is the table. This is an example of tables that we would have had in the past. If you can see that at the back, I applaud your eyesight. But to give a sense of it, this is very much the kind of view that people were asking for us initially. What is going on in the organization? Where are we? What's happening in a part of the world? What's happening for products? What's happening in regions and products and so forth? And how are we performing? So we've kind of mocked this up as based on an original dashboard, but a kind of version of it. And you can see it's very tabular. We've got different parts of reports kind of stitched together to make it look like we have one, and they can look at what category A and category B is, and C, D, and E, and so forth. It's not exactly the most prettiest dashboard. It's probably I don't think you'll see a dashboard like this anywhere else today. But it started to kind of show and kind of build the confidence up in terms of what we were producing for the organization. And we can see here that at the top we brought in little prompts just to kind of allow some little element of interactivity. So people could look at the quarter, or they could see a part of the world and drill down, and obviously all of these tables would do. And we would extract that data and we would update that extract on a regular basis. But we were starting to give that information to business users. Now, this in itself was revolutionary in the fact that it was all working automatically. There wasn't an analyst sitting at the desk waiting to compile this in Excel and pretty it up and then look at the number and say, well, what's going on here, or highlight it and so forth. It was already there once the data was refreshed. So we probably started to even save a few hours for 2-3 analysts or folks in operations in terms of pulling all of this data in. And what's kind of a little bit more I suppose, not as revealing in this report is this is also a combination of different data sets. So there's probably calculations in terms of how our performance is going on here. We had calculations in terms of actuals and plans and so forth. So again, rather than compiling and pulling all this down, we were actually able to present this on a regular basis and get it out to users. And the first question they asked when they saw it was, this is great, can I export it to Excel? Yes. And we said, of course you can export it to Excel. By all means, go export it to Excel. It'll export just like that. You can get a cross tab and you can download it, or you can download all the data down and go knock yourself out. In fact, they probably found that there was so much data in the background of this that it was a little bit overwhelming, so they were happy to keep it like this and to kind of use it from an online basis. So very much a starting point, but it was a good starting point for us for moving on. Now, what we went then from there was to go to a slightly different view. Again, we'll probably reload. Glad the Wi-Fi is working up here anyway. So again, another makeup view of what we have. We're keeping a familiar theme here in terms of blue banners and prompts and so forth, but we're bringing in some kind of colorful aspects to it in terms of bar charts and size maps here and kind of what the regional view is going on in this particular quarter and so forth. And this was another step change. So what we ended up with this particular dashboard was, here's a graphical view of what you want to know. Very quick, very simple. This is Northern Europe, something's happening here, there's a central, there's a few little activities, and if you hover over, you'll get a bit more information. But if you're looking at it from a European point of view, I can see that, the Northern Europe is doing great here, I need to work on Southern, something's not right, that should be much higher. Why is that not the case? Let's go find out. Let's now start to kind of figure out what's happening to it. And again, anyone could go in and update and look at this on a regular basis. And then to supplement that, we also had a second tab on the back, which was the full data view, because the next question we were asked was, this is brilliant, can you download it to Excel? So we let them do that again, and we kind of put that data in there. So it became a little bit more into their comfort zone. It kind of became a bit more familiar to it. And we kind of started to find that use was kind of going up, tracking our Tableau server hits and so forth. So let me just take that away in terms of evolving it. Bye-bye over there for a second. Okay. So our community then, we also started to launch community. So we had an online group, kind of like a version of Facebook, where everyone and users could go in and start to ask questions. Hey, how do I do this? Is there a link to find this? Where do I find this data? So we started to build up an internal community of analysts and data users and visualization experts. And here we started to see kind of work of easier ways of kind of finding the data and again to do some analysis and so forth. And the community themselves then started to produce a lot more colorful and a lot more intensive dashboards that kind of really showed, what the error volume was, where in the world things were happening. Very quick, easy to look at. No diving into all of the pages of Excel. No kind of looking at pivots and so forth. And this is an example of what our community has been developing over the last 3-4 years of all the various dashboards and views, because not everyone is using a dashboard, some will have a particular view, and kind of focusing on, well, this is great, we've got so much interaction. And we're kind of starting to find that the Excel use, the Excel consumption has definitely gone down. And by harnessing the power of the community and helping each other in terms of that, we've also then found that the quality of our own visualizations is going up. We're going from the basic bar charts and we're kind of getting into something a little bit different and a little bit more, I suppose, adventurous, we could say. On top of that, we also brought in a kind of a quality mechanism. So we had set up, I suppose you could call it a Yelp for reporting, where you could go in and you could do a search for particular reports, and the community were able to provide feedback to that. This is good, this is bad, this data doesn't look right, oh, I like this. And we even gave them a little 5-star rating that they could go and start to click on. So again, we were starting to filter out what was noise and really what were the community and our business users wanting to answer. Rather than kind of the general, can you get me all of the information for this quarter? I want to look at it by this and this and this. So the quality and the feedback we got was very much essential for us in understanding what we wanted to do and where we wanted to go with the dashboards that were making a difference. and who were engaging with us, because they were the ones we were obviously chasing, but who wasn't, because they were the ones we needed to kind of bring on board. So that's what our community said. They started to see a lot more dashboards, and they were going, ooh, that's interesting. Now I can go figure out how to go and get some more information and some more data. And that was really exciting, because that was the first time we started to see an interaction and a kind of a spark to what we were doing. So we let the community go, and they started to kind of run things in self-serve. But at the same time, our execs, I suppose, were still a little bit kind of looking away with it, and the specter of PowerPoint loomed nonetheless. Particularly quarter end, where we still spend 2-3 weeks pulling data into Excel, putting it into PowerPoint, presenting it at reviews, and then going back and kind of saying, well, we'll figure out what's going on. And despite the community getting involved with it, for executives and decision makers, they were still working with hundreds of PowerPoint slides that were being refreshed every week, month, and quarter. It was never ending in the road and the journey to that. And really it was getting them away from this idea of, well, it's PowerPoint. It's PowerPoint. We all get PowerPoint. And here's an example of a PowerPoint slide that would typically be used as a review, where you had your chart in terms of performance. There was a little table at the bottom here. We might want to highlight a particular number that happened in this particular quarter. And then we could put in some commentary in here. As much as I like PowerPoint, is there any other way we could interact with this data and perhaps get some use beyond what we see here on this static slide? And we kind of said, okay, well, we've tried it with the data. Let's try and do this with PowerPoint. So can you tell the difference? And we presented that. And with the exception of the little bit of blurriness that I've put in here, that was the equivalent of a PowerPoint slide in Tableau Server. And it was very much identical to what they were looking at. They could see their performance on the top. They could see how activity was happening in. It was comfortable, it was familiar, it was safe, and it was, okay, this is good. And we brought in just kind of some little filters and so forth in here that would start to kind of say, okay, do you want to interact with it a little bit? How do you want to do that? So they started to kind of go, okay, let's see what you do to come up with something for us. So I'm going to show one more thing in terms of how it's evolved so far. And this one, I suppose, is the biggie. Let me make that a bit bigger. Please load. All right. Let's see if I can do that full screen, make it a bit better. So what we started to do with our Tableau version, or Tableau dashboards and reports we did, is we turned them into Tableau PowerPoint decks, but they're not PowerPoint. But you can export them to PowerPoint, because that was a question we were asked. And we kind of built it into kind of this familiar view. So we put a cover sheet, and we stuck our logo on, and we stuck a familiar graphic that everyone sees at the start of our slides. And we put in some definitions, which is, this is our notes on what's happening in this deck. This is the filters. These are what we're applying. This is the logic that we're kind of basing on. These are the calculations of forms, and we kind of list them all down here. So it's very clear that when people are looking at it going, well, how did you come up with that number? Oh, we can go look at our reference at the point here. And we include anything else that's relevant. And when we update this per review, we can just go in and type the text in onto the slide, and then start to look at, what is it that's important for this particular half, quarter, week, and so forth. And we added in a little summary page, which is something that was never in PowerPoint. Give that a second. So this is colorful, but it's colorful for a reason. So this is a demo of an actual PowerPoint version that we have, and it's broken into different parts. So it's a lot to take in at first. It's just a little bit of an assault in the eyes, but it's intentional. First of all, we kind of took this as it's sort of like a newspaper. And when you go to a newspaper, you see the front page, and there's the eye-catching headline that sucks you in. And then you have to go into page 2, 3, 4, 5 to kind of get some more of the detail. For execs, we wanted to kind of give them that newspaper, that kind of top end. So at the top here, we have kind of, here's your performance year on year. Is it up or down, good or bad? What's the number? How are we doing in this particular metric for category performance, up or down? Oh, down, red arrow, okay, good or bad? What are we saving? Oh, we're up 13 points in savings. The arrow's up here, great, and that's our percentage. So I'm kind of seeing very quickly, quick numbers that I can look at and suck into it. And for others, then they start to look at, okay, what are our contracts expiring? Well, this is how much is happening in different parts of the world. This is our renewal rate for various products and so forth. And here's our general trend that we would want to see. And then at the top, then we also have kind of, well, what are our enterprises, our customers doing? How much is there? Oh, this is great. This is good. That's great. And who are our top 10 customers? I don't even know if these are customers, by the way. I kind of stole them off the internet, so apologies if anyone isn't. How are they performing? And if I hover over this, I'll start to see a number that tells me what the performance is and what was the order ID and what was the information we had. So from that point onwards, we've got kind of a number of different reports that are very much key in looking at it. What we brought in over here then was a little bit more of a kind of a click aspect of it and less of the filtering. So if I want to look at it from a different point of the world, I can click on Europe at the bottom and the whole dashboard here will update and refresh for the business users. If I want to look at particular products, and here are some of our products we have, again, I can click on one of these, the whole dashboard refreshes. Because our leaders aren't really kind of too up kind of there yet in terms of action filters and so forth. So we just want it to be point and click, get the number you want. And this gave them a view of the business and how it's performing, looking back retrospectively. But it also did something else. It gave them a view of how the business was performing as the quarter was going on. So now they're not waiting till the end of the quarter to get it. They can see this today. Anyone in the organization go in and look at a dashboard such as this, and they can see what is happening now. Is the number up or down? What do we need to do to make adjustments to it? And how do we go into some detail? And while this is a sort of a smaller version, I'm going to show you one or two of the other slides that we kind of then put in terms of the detail. So again, it's very familiar for them. It's almost like PowerPoint. You have your main graph, you have performance, your targets and so forth, different channels, how you're doing against your plan, and we can start to filter this down then in looking at different lenses of the data if we want to kind of take a break into it. If I want to see how networking is doing, I'll click on networking and I can see that view of things. Again, for results and so forth, where is the performance going on this? Where are we kind of looking at it? So breaking down all the elements that the leaders are used to seeing, we very much have a visual view, and I know we have some numbers here at the side, but they like looking at it and green being good, and then we kind of color code it to their expectations in terms of orange or red if we need to make an adjustment to that. One other one. There's a lovely colorful one I want to show. We love color. Again, it's bar charts. It's nothing too revolutionary in terms of that. We're not really looking too much at heat maps or things of that nature. It's just very clean and clear. Get the number and get the data to it, allowing for all of the filtering that we see in there. Ah, yes, this is it. And presenting it in that way that the business users are familiar with. I mean, that particular view is something that's been around a long time, that has been tweaked and evolved, and we tweak and evolve these dashboards as well as we go through each cycle. And we sit with the business and we ask them what they want to see and what is relevant this time and what isn't, because of course it's always evolving. And when we started to use this, the first intention was, great, can we print this out and we'll keep it on the desk, but can you copy all of this into PowerPoint and then we'll present the copy of this in PowerPoint back to the execs? And we were like, well, it would be better if you showed it to them like this. But, no. But what's happened over time is that the trust and seeing the numbers and doing it alongside PowerPoint initially and now starting to break away is meaning that our conversations that we have when we're doing a review of the business, be it in the quarter or at the end of the quarter, are now a lot more informed, and that we're using all of the various filters and we're using all of the data and can hover over and so forth in a lot more interactive way. So if one of our leaders says, well, what is our performance being for virtualization? Oh, well, we filter that down and start to look at it and see what the data is coming back with. Oh, that's great. As opposed to the old answer, which is, let me find out for you that and I'll get back to you after the call or after the meeting. So that kind of gives a sense of where it is. With some of these, I can kind of traditional things you'll probably see in PowerPoints, kind of charts and a little bit of commentary we can also add in there depending on what we want to bring in there, and we can do some comparisons as well in terms of what's up and what's down and how things have been quarter over quarter. And again, rather than calculating it now and spending time, we can just put in, here's the last year versus next year and how that is performing. So again, it's nothing revolutionary. But at the same time, it is revolutionary, providing that information and that view that the business users get. Where's my mouse? Have I lost it? Oh, hang on. All right, let me take that down. So the general reaction then from the business was, this is so good, this is dangerous. We've never had all of this information together. And that was really exciting for us because that's when we kind of knew we'd hit the right marks in terms of this. The business leaders are excited about getting access to this information. And now they're starting to think, well, what else can we start to utilize this? We've got all of this combined together. There's no work being involved in kind of pulling together. It's automatic. We need to make adjustments when we need to do so. So our last kind of point I just wanted to bring up on this is, I suppose, is on engagement. We have to keep talking all the time on this. There is so much that business users are wanting to look at and say, well, what is the next question? What is it that you're trying to figure out? It's great that you got this information, but you're going to look for something else next time. Or when your boss says, this is our focus now for this quarter, we're going to start looking at all of that information as well. But likewise for us, and as an analytics team and as a community, we're also asking what's our next question? You know, what is it that we want to present back to the leaders? So we're doing work on machine learning. Again, we're kind of, how do we start to bring that into our enterprise data warehouse? How do you start to loop that in with the visualization you see? But also, how do you start to develop the visualizations? How do you get people more familiar with what is, kind of different ways of looking at the data, getting away from the bar charts, getting away from the donuts, getting away from the lines, into something that shows a lot more in trending and how things are going to start to perform, and building in that future view. So for us, engagement has been very critical. We sit with the business, we listen to their calls, we want to understand, what is on their top of mind. We have those conversations, and we engage with our community in terms of asking questions and so forth. That's where we are today. There's still a lot more to come, as I was kind of saying. It's an evolving step, as it will be for everybody. We really want to digitize more of the decks that we see out there. PowerPoint is still there, so we're still on a mission to kind of reduce its use of it. We want to start to standardize our design as well. We want to look at, different views of the company still, and people are deploying a little bit of artistic license. How can we standardize that? How do we get our corporate color schemes in there? How do we start to kind of make these things a little bit more, easier for people to look at rather than a different view depending on what we present? We obviously want to improve our self-serve experience. We want to ensure that the data is kept up to date, the performance and so forth is looking good. Our data quality will forever be kind of to come, because we always have to keep on top of that. The slightest bit of distraction and so forth, and our data quality goes out the window, and then our confidence and trust that we've built up goes out as well. But we're also looking at kind of gnarly problems. We're trying to look at other things now to kind of solve with data, kind of solving data that perhaps is not necessarily tied to our own job description, but other ways of kind of building up our competency. But things that we perhaps haven't had the time to get to, we're now looking back at our community going, do you fancy a little bit of trying this out and doing a bit of time to get to it and so forth? And Tableau Prep, which is something new and quite exciting for us, because I've already seen some instances for Tableau Prep where they're using some of the other systems which are more of the detailed data, and they're downloading that, putting it into Tableau Prep, and now they're starting to use that to present some exciting visualizations. So wrap it up, as I know lunch is beckoning for a lot of us now. I suppose the kind of main takeaways that we've learned through this ongoing journey is talk to your people. They are, central. If they're not talking to your people, you're not going to success. If you build it, they will not come. You need to talk to them, ensure that it is worthy for them to want to go and see. Data is key. I think that's stating the obvious, but data is key, and confidence and trust in that data is essential. The user experience needs to be great, and it needs to kind of evolve. You need to get your users into a comfortable place, get them familiar, and then we'll move them into a slightly uncomfortable place again and get them familiar. But user experience is key. They need to be delighted, they need to be excited, they need to know that they can actually take advantage of the data that's available to them. Engage and build a community. I think this is one of the things we kind of had aside at the start, but we've learned very quickly. Having a community of users out there who are engaged and involved and want to ask questions. And we've set up data days, and we've set up gnarly challenges and problems across the world, and people have come and wanted to get involved in that, like we see at conference here this week, and Makeover Mondays and all of those initiatives. Very much build an internal community. Harness the expertise that you have. People will come and people will go, but your expertise and knowledge will still remain when you have a community. And finally, leverage the expertise. We have experts in the business, we have experts in analytics, we have experts in master data, we have experts in visualization. Leverage all of that. Bring them in as required, because they're going to be very much successful to kind of how you're going to succeed as an organization. And with that, I'll say thank you very much. And if there's any questions, I'll happily answer them. I will get a microphone to you.
Do I need one?
It's coming.
Okay.
Oh, and you can do the survey details and all as well on the app afterwards if you feel so inclined.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I would have one question. How do you measure the decrease in using, let's say, Excel reports, PowerPoint, or is it rather educated guess?
It's we measure it because a lot of the reports we look at now when we see overlap, we're looking at actively retiring it. So we're going through some programs and some projects where we're doing a retirement of all of the old database servers alongside it. So we kind of find out who's using the database servers, what are reports, what are they using it for, and we kind of go through a step of bringing them onto our new systems. So then we can click the box and say, yeah, we're good to retire Excel. So we're definitely going down. Just behind you.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for sharing your experience with analytics and self-service. Really
You're
interesting.
welcome.
I've got a question with regards to one of the slides where you had the self-service environment and the production environment.
Yeah.
For the production environment, you mentioned that you are refreshing the data warehouse 3 to 4 times a day. What front end in terms of tool are you using? Are you using Tableau or something else?
Oh, so production is, so both of them are Tableau Server. The data that's going into the self-serve is refreshed once a week, but it's a self-serve kind of, it's Tableau Server that you're interacting that data with. Production then is the same, it's also Tableau Server, but on the daily basis. Okay. So as a UI, it's the same, but the refreshes and the type of reports you see are different amongst both of them.
Okay. And in terms of real-time analytics, what are you using?
So real-time analytics is an interesting one because we're working on a project at the moment to get a lot more into real-time analytics. I think we're kind of finding our uses probably more closer to near real-time. So we have some data sources that are being used that would refresh perhaps every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes. Okay. But I don't know yet if we're at the point or kind of the need for real-time. I think it's something that's been kind of walked and talked and debated a bit somewhat at the moment.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
So you started off with a timeline slide, but from your slide with all the Excel and PowerPoints until now, how long time has passed?
How much time has passed since we started? We started
Yes.
this particular journey back in, I suppose we started talking about it around 2014, 2015 is when we started kind of getting up to speed with it. And initially a lot of the response was when we brought in Tableau, a lot of the business users were like, this is great, can we all get Tableau desktop license? We had directors and senior directors who wanted desktop licenses for Tableau. And it was a bit of a thing for that in terms of how do you can't because you're not going to need it. You really have to do it. So we had to kind of start to tone down the excitement and then look at the systems that are involved in it, but also know where to fight our battles. Some groups were very happy to kind of go with it because they felt it was too much effort. Others are still clinging onto the data to this day. So we're kind of evolving. And we also had to get our exec leaders buy-in and kind of get their assistance as well in terms of how this is going to pull in. So it's ongoing. I'd love to say we're over it and everything's great and we're Tableau all the way, but not yet, not there yet.
The data journey you presented, is it only for the UK or on a global scale? And how large is your organization where you have deployed this kind of approach?
It's for a global scale. We've got, about 20,000 employees in the company as it is. Now, not all of them have access to that data, obviously. It's depending on the use case and whether they actually do need to get hold of the data. In terms of deployment, it's general. I think where we kind of find a decision is made on one part, it flows across. there's been work going on as well in terms of standardization, and there's been centers of excellence that have been set up in terms of ensuring that each of the parts of the world are in unison with how they want to look at the data and how they're actually working their business. Because also, in addition to when we started on this, I think we found that what was being done in Europe was very different to what was being done in Asia in terms of how they measured performance or how they were actually handling various little things. So we had to standardize across the board. So I think, on the back of that, process has also been a forefront in our minds of how we can ensure that we've got that standard view.
So basically you're paying for 2 Tableau servers licenses. So what is your license model for your Tableau server, and do you have 2 independent Tableau servers?
So we have 2 independent Tableau servers that we use, for it.
So you're paying for both of them?
I'm not paying for them, thankfully.
I mean, so it's you doubled your prices for the reporting environment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you talked about like collaboration and like having a community within your organisation to sort of share ideas and all that sort of stuff. Have you got any tips in terms of how you actually got that going? Because we've got like a knowledge base in our organisation, albeit it's a lot smaller, but trying to get people sort of off their butts to sort of stick stuff in there to be useful is challenging. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, how did you manage to get that going successfully?
It developed quite organically for us. We kind of found that we knew where there were some people in the organisation who could champion it, and we went to them to kind of help champion, and that started to bring others into it. And then we kind of brought in rewards and kind of being identified as an SME for it, or someone who can do this or be seen as as a leader for their particular area. So we kind of gave that a sense of prominence as well. And then we've kind of grown it, saying, well, here's a challenge to try something else, or kind of take away from the corporate data sets that we're all familiar with, try something different. And we've seen more engagement then because people like a change and to try something else new, and that kind of keeps sharpening the saw, I think is the expression we use for it. So it's been an organic process, but I think finding those who are willing to speak out for it has been key for doing that. Right, I think we're good. I think we're all done on time. So thank you all again, and we'll let you go and then enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.